Hey YouTube, guess where I slept last night? That's right, I had an easy breezy sleep in the Walmart parking lot. So I'm going back to Courtside tonight for the boondocking seminar, and I'm kind of interested in the stealth parking one. But before I head into San Diego, I decided I would go down to the Walmart and stock up before I got back on the road. That's weird. So I drove from Arizona to into San Diego last night. I found this really cool little shopping center that had a Planet Fitness as well as a laundromat and a barber. The barber was closed, but I was like, man, this is like the most convenient thing I ever found by accident. Really, I just looked up Planet Fitness and it happened to be in a college town. I'm gonna unplug this inverter because it's making a lot of noise. So I had this lovely fantasy of doing this video today on the beautiful beach, and it rained. So I'm doing this video from in the car in San Diego. So the last thing I did before I left RTR was this seminar by Jarrod, Tocci. You know, he's a YouTuber like, 75% of the people there, like myself, who was doing this seminar on stealth parking. Well, this is one thing I found severely lacking at RTR. It was all about stealth parking and not so much about like urban van dwelling. Like urban van dwelling is a thing. It's a culture. It's its own beast in a way. I felt like whenever like dwelling in a vehicle in the city came up, it was sort of this like sketchy subject. Like people are like, are you full time? And then I would say yes, and then I would explain that I mostly like lived in a city, and there seems to be this moment because for a lot of people at RTR, the only legitimate way to like living your RV van vehicle is if you're constantly going to national parks and campsites and all of that. And like, I get it. There's a nice comfort in that lifestyle, in that, you get to go somewhere and park and be there a consistent amount of time. I remember the first time I parked with Crystal Vanner's camp, like people were pulling stuff out and they were setting up camp. Like they actually had objects that they expected to land somewhere and take out of their vehicle, and I didn't have that, to the point I almost tried to invent it, and then ended up leaving some stuff at the campsite, which hopefully I'll be able to get back later. But the point is, my life has always been park and go, and so that's what I was used to. And for a little while I felt like maybe I'm doing it wrong by being so park and go and not really having anything to set up when I get to a campsite. Well, I don't think so. I mean, the longer I was around people, the more I saw people whose vehicles were definitely more park and go, like they were in their spot to sleep at night. And then if they wanted to move in the morning, it was as easy as getting in their driver's seat and turning a key. There wasn't a lot to break down at their campsite or a lot to unpack at their campsite. I thought it would be wonderful to get the chance to cook outside my car. But the thing is, I'm very geared to cook in the car. And so, like, the way I have things set up in the van, it works really well for me to set up my camp stove inside of it, but I'm almost reaching too much, and it's almost an annoyance when I have to grab things to bring them outside to cook. And that's just the way my van's been set up, because that's how I live. That's my life and my lifestyle. So let's get back to this Jarrod guy, who was a really smart guy and said a lot of common sense things. Like, read parking signs, which is the simplest thing. A lot of people who live in the city, the reason why they're in the city is because they have jobs. But living in a van provides them a lower cost of living than living in an apartment. Like, you almost get to set your own cost of living. And I would say, as high priced as California is, I feel like since I've been in a van, I've been affording it successfully with the work I've been able to find, and I'm mostly doing low-pay jobs. And I'm way more comfortable than I ever was, even in a fairly cheap room. So, financially speaking, otherwise speaking as well, there are things that other people might find more inconvenient, but like for me, I've been fine. And financially, I'm more secure, at least secure enough, that I can leave town at the end of December and sort of like play my card at getting back in January so that I can make enough money to pay for February. And it's not that big of a deal. I don't mind working. I like having to work every once in a while. It gives me a certain amount of focus to be able to like go and do jobs every once in a while, and it gives me a bunch of freedom for none of those jobs that have a full-term hold on me. Like, I met so many people who are part-timers who are like, man, I can't wait that, X amount of years when I can like leave my job and finally have this set amount of money coming in every month, which is nice, but how many years are you selling out just to win that pension or whatever? And obviously, if you've been in a job that long, stick it out, just do it. But like, you could finally get there and then like die 2 weeks later. I mean, you can die tomorrow anyway. I mean, that's just a fact of life. Because you are born, you will die, and you don't know how. It's just going to happen at some point. But when you're waiting, there's so many things that can happen when you're waiting. Now, sometimes it's necessary to wait. Like, I can't go across the country yet. I just don't have the money. That's a lie. I could go across the country and risk it and try to find work along the way, but it's not that big of a deal for me to do like now. It can be a long-term goal, and it's not making me feel any less to make it a long-term goal. And I feel like I'll have more success if I go back to the East Bay and work. But I still haven't talked about Jarrod, right? Alright, so like I said, some of the stuff he said, about his ghost van was common sense stuff. But my biggest problem with the stealth camping seminar is it was completely about living in a cargo van. Like, one of his big tips was like he has like a construction helmet and like a yellow like jacket on the back of his seat and a clipboard, and none of the stuff he ever uses is just to make the van look more like a work van. He also apparently has labels that he can put on the side of his van so he can, oversell it as a work van or whatever. Like business names. Honestly, I find that stuff kind of unnecessary. I mean, take a look at this truck that I saw parked on the streets of San Diego. That thing is anything but stealth, and I'm not saying anybody lives in it, but it's just parked on the street, quietly, doing nothing, and nobody cares. So as long as you're like not blasting music out of the back of your van, or like have a grill set up, even if you have a cargo van, you don't need to oversell it as a work van. It is, off the factory floor, a work van. And what the discussion was missing is someone like Nate from Element Vanlife. Like, he's been living in his Honda Element, which is a standard, standard citizen style vehicle. Like, it's not a work van. Like, if you get a Sprinter or a ProMaster, like, that's a work van. And so in some way, most people walking down the street, you want them to kind of just, in the back of their mind, have no reason to pay attention to it. And to me, putting signs on the side of your van makes people pay attention to it. Now, it may not be negative attention, but they're gonna look at it more because there's something to read than they would a random plain white van just parked. Again, unless you're parking in the same place all the time, and even still, I think that would draw more attention to you, but that's just my feeling on it. Like, there's plenty of people living in cargo vans who, just like Jarrod, have never got a knock. And they're not like fake selling a business on the side of their van. So I think when it comes to parking, I mean, it's more about really paying attention to the signs. Like, are there height restrictions? Are there vehicle type restrictions? Especially if you try to pull off a Class C in the city, which I wouldn't recommend. Like, if you already have a Class C and that's what you have, and you have a job in the city and you need to make it work, do you? I personally, it feels like much to me. A schoolie also feels hard, and it really depends on the style and size of schoolie. But the thing is, once you're in a schoolie, again, a unique vehicle, like, it is a different situation. You're never going to hide the fact that a school bus is a school bus. Like, it looks like a school bus. Or if you have one of those shuttle bus things, like, you're never going to hide the fact that it looks like a shuttle bus. It looks like a shuttle bus. And the thing is, if you don't oversell it, like, before Vanlife, if I saw a shuttle bus, I wouldn't have never had a second thought about the fact that it was a shuttle bus, even if it was parked on the side of a regular street. Now, if it's sitting, in suburbia, like, too long, I might have questions. But honestly, in like busy city areas, outside of apartment complexes, near nursing homes, like, as long as it fits in the parking spot, that it's legally allowed to fit in, like, I'm gonna have no second thoughts about that shuttle bus, and you don't need to put, like, grandma's, service on the side of it. So I completely disagreed with him on that. On top of that, I think it made people who weren't in cargo vans question what they could do. Because, like, the thing is, if you're in, like, I'm in a minivan, and before that was in a car, like, you can just park wherever it's legal to park. And the thing is, cops are not looking for you. In fact, if anything, they're either one, they get it, it's expensive, or two, they feel sorry for you, especially if you're female. Like, things like, there seems to be this reaction that I should be more afraid if I'm female. The fact is, most cops are sort of like, old boys club guys. And then you can take that as a positive, is that when they see a woman vulnerable, most cops will want to protect that woman. I.e., they will think, oh, I feel really bad for her, I'm gonna leave her alone. And I can say that as I have slept very obviously in the front seat of my car. So I really felt like, because he's never had a knock, and because like, his whole bragging point is he's never had a knock. He lives in a Sprinter in LA, if you don't know who this guy is. And the thing is, I think he was lacking knowing how to handle a knock, because he's never had one. And he's never had one because he has, like, a relatively nice looking vehicle that's parking legally. All this extra stuff he's doing, like, honestly, I feel like it's extra. I come out the side of my minivan all the time, and sometimes I only stay within the 3 to 4 block radius. Like, nobody's hunting you down. If one person one time saw you come out the side of your van, and they don't live in the neighborhood, and they were just passing through, they honestly don't care. Or they're like, you got a camper in there? That's cool. Like, they usually have questions, and it's never been negative. Like, there's either like, oh, she's homeless, so I feel bad for her, which isn't necessary, but it just means they're not going to bother me, and the last thing they want to do is to put me in a situation that's worse. Or two, oh, cool, she's one of those Vanlife people. Or three, they don't know what to think, and they just go about their day. When they get worried is when they're one of those people who don't want, quote-unquote, the homeless living permanently in their neighborhood, which is why the move rule is important. But honestly, as long as you look like you're affording your vehicle and keeping it up, most people won't care. Like, this whole idea that we need to be in this panic about the cops. The cops don't care about us. Like, they really don't. In major cities, they have way more important things to worry about than who's sleeping in their car. When they have to care is when a citizen makes a call. So the person you're trying not to tick off is that one citizen that's annoyed that you're living in your car. And out of most of the citizens in the world, most of them don't care. They're caught in their own narrative. They are the stars of their own story, and you are just background. And as long as you stay background, there is no problem. So, what about security? Security officers, again, aren't going to pay. Most security officers, it's not a great job. Like, most people don't grow up, there are people who grow up and want to be cops, and they want to be cops to pursue major crimes. Security officers are usually people who were just looking for a job. They're just trying to make their dime. As long as you're not upsetting the situation, i.e., again, back to the citizen or the manager, they also don't care. Like, two people who've asked me to leave parking lots, like, they didn't feel great about it. It wasn't an aggressive conversation. Like, not at all. So, like, this fear that was in the room, like, some ways I don't think he was bringing it down, and it's because he hasn't had the experience. He also hasn't been living in his van that long. I think he said 18 months. 18 months isn't that long. Like, Nate from Element Van Life, he's been living in his Honda Element for what, like 3 or 4 years now? And then he told the woman asked about putting a canoe on top of her roof, and he was like advising her to put it in a box and all this other stuff. He was talking about putting a ladder over the solar panel so nobody sees it. This is why I disagree with that, and it goes back to something he himself said. He said nobody knows what that air vent is. If you get like the Max Air fan or whatever on top of your van, nobody knows what it is. Like, really. Even if I put it on top of my minivan, people wouldn't know what it is. Because they don't know. Like, unless you're in the lifestyle, you don't know. And the people outside the lifestyle who do know what it is tend to think it's cool. So again, you're trying to hide this from the wrong people. And then solar panels, the same thing. Like, on top of a tall van, on a minivan, it might be more obvious what they are depending on the height of your minivan. It definitely will be obvious on top of a car if you did do that. But on top of a tall van, like, it just looks like a flat, thin surface. Nobody knows what it is, and they also aren't thinking about it. You don't need to put a ladder over it. And the fact you even gave that as advice made me want to laugh. I mean, like, that's just going too far. Nobody's looking for it. Nobody knows what it is. I mean, perhaps a minor threat is somebody who do understand the signs to look for people living in vans might go, somebody's living in there, so there might be something to steal. The cops don't care about it, and general citizens don't know what they are. So really the only threat is that 1 in 100 thief who's trying to break into your van to steal things. And you might want to think about where you're parking if you're encountering that person a lot, because people who are going to steal from a car, they're either going to look for it in a vulnerable spot. When my car got broken into, it was parked into a shady, it was parked in a shady corner, and I wasn't in it. Like, nothing has ever happened to my car, even when I was in a so-so neighborhood when there was a person in there. Because most thieves, they want to break a window, grab stuff as quickly as they can, and keep it moving. Which is exactly what they did. When I was living in my car, that's what happened. But most thieves are looking for a quick and easy, fast grab. They don't want to deal with a human because a human is going to slow things down. So, yeah. So either one, you're in your van, or two, you park it in safe spots as much as possible. There's a difference between thieves and predators. Predators want to prey on a person. Which most rapists are. Like, they're looking for a vulnerable human that they want to harm. Thieves want stuff, and they want to turn that stuff into profit for them. And they want to do it as quickly and as easily as possible. Otherwise, they just go get a job and work hard for it like the rest of us. So it's just ridiculous, and it was way overshooting. And overall, I think, like, that whole discussion, it needed a panel. Like, there was a woman there who lives in a huge pink and gray, technically, bus in the city, not far from LA. And then there was Gus in a Bus was there. Gus in a Bus parks, in all kinds of areas in a short gray school bus, and there's no hiding what that is. So how you handle yourself when you choose a schoolie is way different than how you handle yourself when you choose a cargo van. And even living in the car versus the minivan has been different. And I'm sure if I got a cargo van, it would be a slightly different lifestyle. And how you handle those possibilities of getting a knock are different depending on those situations, and the risk you take is different, and where you park is different, because there are regulations on size of vehicle depending on what area you're in, especially areas that are trying to filter out people living in vehicles, let's be honest. And most of the more popular areas of California, and here I'm talking about San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles, like, they're definitely trying to filter out the possibility that you can buy a Class C and park on a regular street easily. People do it. People figure out places to park in all kinds of different types of vehicles. And what this discussion really needed was, it needed a passenger car, regular old car. I need somebody who's doing it successfully in the city. And one person I met who's doing that is Oracle Jessie, who has a YouTube channel right here. I'm going to post it somewhere. And she's really, really great. She's living in a car with 2 cats. Like, full time. I believe in, like, Austin, Texas. Which is in LA, but it's still, like, it's an urban van dwelling situation in a car. I've lived in a car, and a minivan in the Berkeley, San Francisco, and Oakland zones successfully. And yes, I've gotten a few knocks, but he didn't know how to answer the knock question because he's never gotten one. And the thing is, he may eventually get one. He may never get one. But either way, having somebody up there who hasn't experienced isn't helping somebody who's in a more obvious vehicle. Because somebody in a more obvious vehicle is probably going to get a knock at least once. And even with some of the more obvious vehicles, it's only been like once or twice. You needed somebody who lived in a standard RV, either a B or a C, that calls out more to itself in that discussion. You needed somebody who lived in a car. You needed somebody who possibly lived in a minivan, because I consider those two experiences, and it should have been I walk past white cargo vans all day, and even if I hadn't been thinking about this video, I wouldn't have paid attention to that truck with the paint all over the side of it. So I'm a little frustrated about sort of the stealth camping discussion, because I think it lacked a range of urban van dwellers. And I think also, like, there is a culture of that not being the ideal situation at RTR. And I think, like, you have part-timers who live in a house, and then they'll like go and they'll be in their RV or van for months at a time, or go on trips, and those people are considered more legitimate than people who live their entire life in their vehicle and occasionally go out to campgrounds and occasionally go out the forest, but still have a life in the city. And I think it's perfectly acceptable to balance your life that way. I mean, it's like people who live mostly out on campgrounds and, you know, on BLM land and all of that. Occasionally they want to go in the city and experience some city life and all of that. So why isn't the reverse as acceptable? Like, I feel like RTR was completely rejecting that as a reality. And on top of that, didn't even know how to have a panel discussion about it. And so ended up having this limited sort of view of stealth camping from a guy, again, only knows it from a cargo van perspective. So I was a little saddened by it. But I was glad I went. I was also glad I got to talk to some other people who are stealth camping. And like I said, this includes Gus in a bus, Oracle Jesse, who's living in a car. On Instagram, you can find hashtag, I believe it's bubblegum bus, or hashtag have faith bus. Giant pink bus. And she's living in it in the city. And she has to use parking lots. Like, I never use parking lots because that's a lie. I was in a parking lot last night. And I was in a parking lot in Walmart. So I barely use parking lots. But I mostly sleep in neighborhoods, street parking, all of that. But it didn't have those range of perspectives of what it's like to live. And I met a woman, a really cool woman who's not on YouTube, who lives in a Dodge Chrysler. That was like one of my favorite things I ever saw, because I was like, there's so many things in this van I want to adapt for myself. So it was severely lacking, and it kind of saddened me, because I was like, this isn't good information for people in cars. It isn't good information for people in minivans or people in larger, more space occupying vehicles. And I definitely think it needed a large rig, either a car and a minivan, or one or the other, in addition to somebody who lived in a cargo van. Because his advice was so cargo van specific. So if you're a fan of him, great, but really limiting discussion. All right, peace from Rainy San Diego. Enjoy your day. So this is how easy stealth parking is. You see this sign? I'm on a regular street, actually a really nice street, in San Diego. You see this street sign? 2-hour parking, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., which means I just need to be out of here before 8 a.m. Not a problem. Plenty of parks and beaches to go to by 8 a.m. And then you look on this side, you see there's a bush there. I'm not sure what's behind there. I think it's an apartment complex. And then you turn around, apartment complexes, plenty of street parking. This is easy. I don't know why people trip out so much about alleged stealth parking. And even if I was like a cargo van that fit in this space, there's no restrictions on me parking here.